I would like to show my respect and acknowledge the traditional custodians of the lands on which these interviews take place. I would also like to respectfully acknowledge the Wangal people, who are the traditional custodians of the land on which I live and work.
So the majority of first home buyers today in Australia, the way they get into home ownership is through the bank of mum and dad. And it's creating a huge gap between the haves and the have-nots, because really for the first time in Australia, it doesn't matter how hard you work. If you're on a lower income, there's no way you're going to get into home ownership.
Hi, I'm Prema, the host of this podcast, What Can We Do? In each episode, I speak to someone or an organization that's making impact. You will learn about the issue, why it exists, the challenges, but most importantly, how you can be a part of the solution. My hope is that you can take away 2 to 3 tips each episode that will support you in your helping journey. Today I have with me Stephen Woodlands from Head Start Homes. Hi, Stephen.
Hi, Prema. How are you?
I'm good. How are you?
Good, thank you.
Could you introduce yourself and your organization and basically summarize the work or problem it's trying to solve?
Sure. So I'm the founder and managing director at Head Start Homes. And Head Start Homes helps single mums, First Nation peoples, and other families living in community housing to get into home ownership. And we do this by addressing 3 major barriers which we've found, being the deposit barrier, the know-how barrier, and the supply barrier. We've provided innovative solutions to all 3 of those barriers, and we find if we get all 3 done at once, then it brings about the very best outcomes for our clients. And what's really important for us is for every person that we transition into home ownership, we then free up a new spot for someone who's on a wait list and likely to be homeless.
What motivated the start of Head Start Homes?
So I grew up in social housing, and as a young boy, I didn't always have the privilege of having a safe and stable home. At the age of 4, my mum, brother, sister and I, we had to leave our home, and we lived in all forms of unstable housing, being crisis accommodation with the Salvation Army, crisis accommodation, transitional care, couch surfing. So from that experience, I learned the importance of having a stable home. When you're having to move school time, you don't want to make friends because you have to say goodbye, and you just feel like you're not a very productive child, and within the community. But then was really privileged at the age of 7. Mum fought really hard, and we got into a community housing home, and finally we had security of tenure, meaning that we couldn't be moved on anymore. And that had a profound impact on my life, my mum's life, my brother and sisters, because we could, concentrate on doing school and being kids, and mum could concentrate on being work.
And when did you start this organization?
I started the organization probably 6 years ago, but I think it's fair to say growing up in social housing, it put a desire in me and my family to bring about change. And mum's the inspiration behind the idea, because mum was a nurse. She worked really hard bringing up us kids. And then, she was the first in our family to get a degree. She studied for 10 years part-time while doing everything else. But then when she got the degree, she had to pay maximum rent, which is effectively market rent. And she had no extra income or disposable income for a deposit, which meant we were trapped in housing, social housing for much more longer than what we needed to be, basically. And that problem always stuck with me, kind of the injustice of that. We like to live in a society where if you work hard or you try hard, there can be rewards. But I sometimes call the social housing system, it can become a bit of a labyrinth. First and foremost, as a young boy, it was the most important safety net that we could have because it provided that stable housing. But then as you start to get back on your feet, it's actually really hard to get out. And that problem's always, stuck with me. And hence the drive for a solution is what I really started concentrating on about 6 years ago.
This solution that you're bringing to your clients, is this something that 6 years ago other community housing providers or housing assistance organizations were not doing?
I started, planning for 6 years. We've only been in operations for about 2 years, but I think it's definitely fair to say that currently, and this is one of our big objectives, is there's this view that people living in social community housing, there's no pathway into home ownership, and our clients tell us that time and time again. And we love our community housing partners, but they're in the business of helping, homeless people, providing shelter, and it's not particularly a real focus for them, rightly so. And that's why we love partnering with them and cross sectors with banks and developers in order to think of a holistic solution into home ownership, because it's really important. Pretty much all Australians aspire to become homeowners. And I don't think it's a very fair thing to say just because of your form of housing, you should have no pathways to achieve your home ownership dream.
So really the aim of Head Start Homes is to get a client out of transitional housing into a secure home where they will hopefully never have to move again.
So there's two parts to our vision. So our vision is a safe and stable home for everyone with fair and practical, and the second part's with fair and practical pathways into home ownership. And our solutions, which I can talk about more in a minute, they actually uses home ownership as, the fair and practical pathways into home ownership as the remedy to achieve the first part, which is a safe and stable home for everyone. As a young boy, I had to wait 3 years to get, allocated into a community housing home. Wait lists now, you're having to wait up to 10 years. The problem's getting worse. And one of the main drivers for that is there's no exit out once you get in. So that's something that we really, fundamentally are looking to do, is to change the system to provide that equal access into home ownership. So people on a wait list can get access to their community housing home and get on their feet in order to hopefully one day become aspiring homeowners. And then we help them into that home ownership pathway.
So if someone came to Head Start Homes, what sort of journey would they take?
We provide what we call our Head Start Guarantee, which is our premier product offering, which removes the need for deposit, and also our empowerment services, which provide our clients with the tools they need in order to get a bank loan, and then importantly, in order to find the right home at the right price. Because what we've found and what we know is if you've never bought a home before, you might not even realize it as a dream. And our clients tell us that. Once we say, hey, you can come to us and we'll help you get your loan and not need a deposit, they're like, everything's going to change now. I now have a reason to save. And we see really great outcomes in their savings plans. So basically, if a client comes to us, they're referred by their community housing provider, and their community housing provider could be Aboriginal Housing Office or Community Housing Limited. They know their clients, right? They're tenancy managers. They have a personal relationship with them. They know if they're aspiring homeowners. They know what part of their journey they're on. They know if they're employed. They refer into us. What we do is we then support them to start the journey towards the bank, but it starts much earlier. We provide a financial capability service. So we teach our clients how to save, how to get a credit check, if there's problems with their credit score, how to fix that. And then once they're ready, we refer them directly into a lender that will provide them, will accept our guarantee, and I'll talk about our guarantee in a moment, but also provides discounted interest rates, low fees, so the best home loan product out there, and that enables a wonderful journey for the client because they've got Head Start Homes supporting them all the way through. And we know from our clients, they would rather come to us than go to a bank. It might be scary to go to a bank. You might not know where to start. So that's part of the empowerment element. And we say that empowered individuals make the best decisions for their own lives. So let's provide all the information, tools and resources so they have equal access to information in order to achieve their home ownership dreams. Now, the second part is, and one of the biggest barriers, as I talked about before, is the deposit barrier. And effectively, the way we remove that deposit barrier is we act as guarantor for our clients. So the majority of first home buyers today in Australia, the way they get into home ownership is through the bank of mum and dad. And it's creating a huge gap between the haves and the have-nots because really for the first time in Australia, it doesn't matter how hard you work. If you're on a lower income, there's no way you're going to get into home ownership. So what we do is we leverage, the model which is used by more wealthy Australians, which is called the parental guarantee. And under a parental guarantee, what happens is parents say, hey, bank, please, we vouch for our child. If something goes wrong, you not only have access to their home, you also have access to our home as security. If nothing goes wrong, both the parents and the child gets to keep their home. We replicate that model and we like to see ourselves as parents, but rather than providing a second home as security. We provide cash that sits with the bank in a term deposit account. And if nothing goes wrong, then that security will come back to us between 1 and 10 years in order to recycle and use for another family. So our model is recyclable and it keeps on helping more and more families over time. And that's another thing that we're really excited about our model. But of course, what that does is it removes the need for that deposit and that mortgage insurance for our clients, which is so important to have equal access to home ownership.
How many clients have you been able to help in this 2 years that you've been operating?
And we literally just started, I think this is a bit at 12 months ago. We've helped 5 families into home ownership. Majority of those families are single Indigenous mums. We've helped a refugee family in Adelaide. We've got operations in mid-North Coast, New South Wales, Adelaide. And we just helped create a landmark agreement in remote Queensland, where we will help up to 22 families, First Nation families, into home ownership. With all of the families, we're just so pleased and proud of what they've achieved. Getting into home ownership as a single parent, we're told, look, this isn't possible to do this, especially from social housing, and we've proved you can. And really the key element of that is that empowerment, those providing equal access to education is so important in the journey, and then removing that deposit barrier as well. So we're really pleased about that. And on our website, there's some wonderful stories about our client. Charlene's, her story from homelessness to home ownership, which is really powerful. And Iyasu and Martha, from a refugee camp in Africa to proud homeowners in Australia. And Iyasu was actually a refugee in a refugee camp for 20 years. And it's probably one of the proudest homeowners in Australia to have, and to be able to have supported them into home ownership is, we're just so excited.
How does Head Start Homes get funded?
The way we get funded at the moment is from goodwill of our corporate partners or from, government and from foundations. A big shout out to Westpac. Westpac are our founding partner, and they started believing in the vision when I was at Westpac. And as it got more legs, they said, look, Stephen, we actually want to support you in this and the organisation. So I'm actually seconded from Westpac until 2023 working on this initiative. And, I've got to shout out to Westpac. Not many other employers let people follow their dreams in order to do good in the community. So that without that foundational support, we wouldn't be where we are today. We've also got a number of grant funds from Aboriginal Housing Office, which has been phenomenal in the mid-North Coast to support our clients. And those grant funds, of course, it was for our guarantees. They'll just be recycled to help more and more Aboriginal families living in New South Wales get into home ownership. We are doing a big piece of work as we go into 2022 and 2023 to create a self-sustaining model where we're not reliant on the goodwill, of wonderful corporations and organisations, that we have our own revenue in order to be able to grow so we can really focus on helping our clients.
When you brought this concept and you started Head Start Homes, and I am guessing you approach other community housing providers as partners, did anyone go, wow, how come we didn't think of that?
Yeah, I get that. And that's always a compliment, because people say, hey, it sounds so simple. Why has no one ever done it before? I think the short answer is that while it sounds really simple, creating cross-sector collaboration, so bringing the banks, bringing community housing providers, and developing a new banking product, because that's what we had to do with our guarantee, isn't as easy as it sounds. And that's why there was a 1 to 2 year lead in time in order for us to start our operations, because we had to get that all covered. But I guess the short answer is, when you look at all the benefits that come from home ownership, then there should be more of a focused way, because what we've proven is you can't say anymore that people on lower incomes can't get into home ownership. What we're proving is, yes, just remove those barriers, those structural barriers, and anyone who wants to should have that equal access to home ownership. And that's what's really important to us. And I will also note that the federal government have their own guarantee model now, which is absolutely wonderful. And that helps up to 10,000 families a year. But our clients, they're not on high enough incomes to be able to access that. You still need a 5% deposit, and you can be earning up to $200,000 to access that, which is a much different demographic compared to our clients.
Yeah. In no way am I saying that I think it's a flick of a switch thing that you've done that's simple. I guess But then again, you've answered the question saying that it really takes an amount of cross-collaboration, and perhaps that's why it hasn't been done before. I think I always see, especially in the community sector, people working in silos, but so much more could be tapped and harnessed if people just started talking to each other and trying to find solutions, I guess.
I think that's a good point. And I think one of the strengths at Head Start Homes is we have 100 organisations that support us, or that we can pick up the phone and help us problem solve stuff. And we're talking about senior people and really big, organisations or charities or not-for-profits. For instance, to develop our referral process, we worked with 16 community housing providers to develop that, saying what's the best way to refer clients in, how do we maximise social return, and we built a points-based system to do that. And that's the core of what Head Start Homes does, is it collaborates in order to find the best solution for our clients. So we're very client-centric. And I think, this is the age of collaboration, and that's gone, a long way for us to bring forward some of the solutions that we're being able to provide for our clients.
Is it just you in Head Start Homes, or do you have a team of people supporting you?
So we have wonderful staff members that help us, but all up, we're equivalent of 2 full-time workers. And a lot of people get surprised when they hear that, because we're doing a lot of wonderful work. But off the back of that, we've got over 100 volunteers. We have all those corporate supporters that, provide in-kind support. And last year alone, I think we're up to $2 million in in-kind support. So we could use Westpac offices for meetings and things like that, which just make life a whole lot easier, or their function rooms, or, we've got a wonderful relationship with St. George and some of our other banking partners. And then the big law firms, KWM and Cause, so they provided so much value in relation to free legal advice, which was so important when we were getting created. So without that support, we wouldn't be where we are today.
Is your professional background in banking?
Yes. So I have, my professional background is both in banking, and I've worked for a couple of members of parliament. So those skills really helped me in order to bring about the people and the thinking to solve, to provide the solutions to which we've come up with. But I have over 10 years experience working in banking and had many senior roles in banks, including in risk and also, chief of staff at St. George Bank. So not only learning how banking works, but having those connections has been really important. And one thing I learned on this journey is when people are talking about home ownership, they tend to gloss over the importance of finance. But without finance, you can't get the loan. But, people always concentrate on the stock, and there's not that many solutions in relation to actually getting the home loan. And that's where we saw a big gap. And that's where we've focused a lot of our intention, is removing the barriers so you can get equal access to home finance.
There were 3 barriers you talked about. One was the know-how barrier, then the deposit barrier, and the last one was the supply barrier. Could you speak a little bit about that?
Yeah, sure. So the supply barrier is the newest area to which we're looking to provide solutions. And that's all about the fact that currently in Australia, there's a crisis in relation to accessing affordable homes, whether to rent or to purchase. So what we were able to do and provide a solution was that Burketown model that I spoke about earlier. And this is in remote Queensland. The Berkshire Council approached us and said they'd been trying for 10 years to sell their homes at a discount to their tenants. However, banks weren't allowing that. They were still requiring a deposit. So what we did, working with the council and also Westpac, was we developed a new way in which the bank could lend and not require a deposit, with the council selling the properties at a discount. And what this means is it brought about a very great client outcome, because the First Nation tenants who are purchasing the homes don't need a deposit, but they have positive equity in their home from day one. And importantly, say if the house was worth 100,000, well, then the home loan they require is only 60,000, which means that they can much better service the loan, and it's just providing them on the pathway to get out of poverty and become self-reliant.
I'm sure a lot of people will be watching what you're doing. I'm guessing there's legs for this model to kind of be implemented, not in sort of the mainstream market, but to encompass more people and to support more people in the future?
Yes, that's a very good point. So absolutely, and Head Start Homes is all about, open sharing. We take it as a compliment if people want to use the way that we're thinking in order to help others. So absolutely, and just on that last supply model, we're actually looking to take that learnings from the Burketown example and extend that nationwide. So how can we work with developers like, we're working with Stockland and Lendlease and Nightingale, who are developers. How can we look to provide discounted homes to people right around Australia so that they can get, no deposit and positive equity from day one? So that's something that really excites us because it really starts to reduce the barriers into home ownership more. But then we're also looking, currently we're helping people in social and affordable housing. But at some point, if we have unlimited capital, can we expand our operations? And, the model works for people with disabilities under the National Disability Insurance Scheme. You get a housing payment, so it could work there. It can work in so many other different areas as well, people on low incomes and private rental. So, helping everyone in different target markets absolutely aligns to our vision of a safe and stable home for everyone.
Speaking about the future, where would you like Head Start Homes to be in, say, 5 or 10 years?
Everyone always likes to talk about numbers, and I'm sure what we like to say is that we're looking for good growth and to stay true to purpose while also, helping as many clients as we can. What is the value of Charlene of, getting into home ownership? It's priceless, because not only is she now on a pathway to not be in poverty like the many women over 55, which is the single women over the age of 55 is the fastest growing rate of homelessness in Australia, which is shocking. So she's no longer on that trajectory because she's a homeowner. And the reason for that is because when you own your own home, your payments go down over time as you pay off your mortgage. But when you rent, they stay the same or go up. When you own your own home, you have something to rely on retirement. And when you own your own home, you can hand that on to your kids, which is very different to when you're a renter. So home ownership is a proven way to end intergenerational poverty because of all those benefits. So what is the value of helping a family get into home ownership? It's priceless, and we don't ever want to lose sight of that. Not only that, Charlene, has got a promotion at work like most of our other home starters. She's set an example for her kids. So it's just, the impacts of this are just so profound and exciting. And we want those stories to keep going. But then I will say we've got a lot of work and innovative models in the background in order for us to have good growth, to have good scale, and to do it in the best way for our clients.
What are some of the misconceptions in doing the work that you have started to do?
Yeah, so some of the misconceptions is, and I got a lot of this when I was starting. So the fourth barrier, which I don't talk about as much, but is definitely there, is unconscious bias. And it happens on both areas. It happens, both outside and kind of within the sector, which I found really interesting. So some examples of unconscious bias is when I was starting this, some people would say, well, look, if we donate to you, or if we help you, how do we make sure the money that we're giving you isn't going to drug dealers? And I guess that's a bit of a stigma that, is placed on social housing, people living in social housing or community housing. And our clients are some of the hardest working people you'll ever meet, just like my mum, single parents, working, you name it. So that's one of the unconscious bias that we've come across. But another one that surprised me a little bit more that I didn't think I'd come across is there's some people that believe that people like our clients can't do it themselves. They need the sector, they need, another charity or help in order to survive. And I find that type of thinking can be very debilitating, because what it means is it kind of sends a message to the person receiving the support that you can't look after yourself, you need us. And that's why one of our core philosophies is empowered people make the best decisions for their own lives, because really what we should be doing is removing the key barriers in order to provide equal access. Another one that people overlook is just how much of a labyrinth the social housing system or the system can be once you're in. I touched on this earlier. But people don't realise that if you're doing well, it's the only area that you can end up paying market rent. So you get penalized for doing well, but also you can get evicted for doing well. And I've had many people tell me, I'm scared to get a job because I might lose my home. Now, if you've suffered homelessness, the thing that you're going to value the most is having a stable home over your, a stable roof over your head. And if you're told that by working that you could lose your home, your community housing home and your social housing home, and you know that's a more secure form of tenure than private rental, well, then of course that's going to be, a demotivator for you to further your career. And that's another thing that we really focus on. And I believe that's a real reason why our clients, once they've come to us, most of them do get those promotions at work, because they're getting free from that fear of being evicted for earning too much. And that's part of the reason why I call the system, it can be a labyrinth, and it provides, a whole lot of disincentive to not become empowered. And we want to unwind that.
What is the challenge for you personally or for the organization? What are some of the challenges you've had to overcome?
I've been a little bit surprised, I guess, that we haven't had more funds coming towards us in the way of guarantees. I honestly believed when we showed government, hey, we can save you many hundreds of thousands of dollars by providing us with a guarantee, that they'd all, jump to the party. I guess what I've learned then is it's more of a process in order to free up the funds, no matter how good the story is. And we're doing work on that. But I guess that's something that I've found pretty interesting, because I'm quite a logical person. I thought, look, if I can give you proof that a $72,000 contribution could free up, 10 homes over 30 years, and to build those homes would cost you over $2 million, then that $72,000 sounds like a really good way to free up social housing and community housing. So I guess that's one of the challenges I've had as well, is just realizing that you can have this wonderful solution that works well for everyone, but then you've just still got to work hard in order to keep the dollars flowing in.
What's the risk of not having an organization like Head Start Homes?
I truly believe Head Start Homes has helped to raise awareness, and that's another thing we do, not only of the external community as to how we see people living in social housing, but just as importantly, how people living in social housing see themselves. And I've been on both, ends of that, of seeing the power of the equal access to opportunity, the great energy and positivity that comes with that. So my fear that is, if Head Start Homes didn't exist, then people would go back to the belief that people in social housing, it's no point talking about home ownership to that cohort, which is up to 800,000 people or more. And then, people would lose sight of that. And also that sector would lose sight of their home ownership dreams. And I think that's a real risk. I think the other thing that we really bring to the table is the collaboration. As I said earlier, developers and banks aren't really speaking, and community housing providers aren't speaking to banks, and everyone's a bit confused about what everyone does. But we're specialists. We actually understand right across sectors what's going on. And as I said, we can pick up the phone and go, hey, bank, would this work for you? Or hey, CHP, would this work for you? And having that ability to communicate, connect, has been just so valuable.
Is there any way that the public can support the work you do?
So we like to be innovative in our fundraising, because we also have a model that we don't want to take from other deserving charities. So, asking for donations while welcome is great. That's a big field, and there's lots of other needing charities as well. So we've created a really innovative way of fundraising, which is called Phones for Homes. And basically what you can do is you can send in your old phone, if it's sitting in a drawer, to us. You just go on our website, you have a satchel sent to you. And then that phone, if it can be resold, we get the proceeds from that. If it can't be resold, if it's too old, then it gets recycled and it doesn't end up as electronic waste. So it's good for the environment and it's good for our community. We're really pleased with that initiative. So if you have an old phone at home, then please jump to our website and have a look to see whether you can to recycle it as part of our Phones for Homes initiative.
If there's one thing you wanted someone to take away from this interview, what would that be?
That empowered individuals make the best decisions for their own lives. And that currently the reason why a whole lot of people aren't getting in home ownership is not because they're not trying hard, it's because they face barriers that other Australians don't. So please believe in that, but take away with you that everyone should have equal access to opportunity, and everyone should have equal access to home ownership. We believe in Head Starts, not handouts. So we're not talking about giving money to our clients. We're just talking about giving equal access and a level playing field. And really, if we can all come on that journey together, then I think that's a remarkable outcome for the whole of the Australian community.
Thank you for listening. If you enjoyed this episode, please subscribe or follow it on social media. Your support will help this podcast reach more listeners. This podcast is produced by Samuham Media.